Let's jump right into this explainer, because today we're looking at one of the absolute best geopolitical underdog stories ever recorded in the lore of the Chronicles of the League Sea. We are talking about the birth of the Kingdom of Cyan. I mean, how does a scattered, chaotic band of coastal raiders manage to completely outmaneuver a deeply established land-based superpower? Well, if you love history that pivots on sudden, brilliant shifts in strategy, you are going to absolutely love this one.
There is a powerful insight from the in-universe historian Brother Alaric that actually serves as the perfect entry point into this whole dramatic saga. He says, "A kingdom is remembered not by the height of its walls, but by the faith of its people." Think about that for a second. Most great powers throughout history, they rely on massive fortresses or just endless agricultural wealth. But Alaric is telling us right up front that Cyan was entirely different. Their power didn't come from stone walls. It came from the sheer grit, the adaptability, and the unwavering loyalty of the people who sailed its waters.
So to really wrap our heads around the mighty kingdom of Cyan, we actually have to start at its incredibly unlikely birthplace. They didn't start out in some grand, gilded capital. No, they started in a hidden, completely lawless pirate haven known as Palm Bay. Picture this. It was barely visible from the open sea, literally just a narrow crack in the cliffs that opened up into this massive natural harbor. And for decades, it was just a chaotic sanctuary. Pirates, refugees fleeing persecution, hardened sailors. No king, no laws. Just captains settling their disputes with a brawl in the local taverns.
Now, this whole era was defined by a stark contrast between two completely opposed cultures. On one side of the ring, you have the established superpower of Gondor. We're talking prosperous inland farmers, master engineers, people who draw their vast wealth strictly from the land. And on the other side, you have the ancestors of Cyan, rugged coastal pirates and refugees relying entirely on the sea just to survive. It is the ultimate clash of cultures, right? The rigid, methodical builders of the land going up against the chaotic, endlessly adaptable masters of the water.
Which brings us to the ancient rulers of Gondor, specifically guys like King Lorius Amadus. Gondor's wealth originally came from abundant harvests. It wasn't about conquest. But to protect their lucrative merchant caravans from those pesky coastal raiders, King Lorius decided to build Gondor's first true navy, the dreaded Eversor warships. He launched this highly successful campaign to squash the pirates. But here's the kicker. He had absolutely no idea what those raiders were about to become in response to his attacks. It's like poking a bear, but instead of a bear, it's a hydra.
Because that intense Gondorian pressure, it forced the pirates into a corner. And in the year 310 AE, a truly visionary pirate captain named Cyan Stulsti stood up at the Great Assembly in Palm Bay and proposed the unthinkable. He argued that to survive, all these competing pirate fleets had to unite under a single crown. Now obviously, an old captain yelled out that no man commands the sea. But Cyan delivered this brilliant counter. No, but one man may command those who sail upon it. And just like that, the seeds of a kingdom were planted.
Taking the royal name King Lumber I, he systematically transformed a band of chaotic raiders into actual citizens. And how do you do that? Well, he founded a permanent royal fleet, he organized coastal taxation, and he divided the land among his most loyal captains, effectively creating a brand new aristocracy practically overnight. He didn't just conquer. He built robust institutions. He gave these completely lawless sailors a shared identity and, more importantly, a compelling reason to fight for each other instead of constantly fighting against each other. He anchored this entirely new society on three core pillars: the crown for unity and law, the church for faith and stability, and the sea for raw power. And with this new structure, Cyan evolved at a terrifying pace. The ultimate manifestation of this new society was their absolute masterpiece, the Crusador warship. Painted light blue to camouflage with the water, these ships were faster, heavily armed with cannons, and just packed with highly trained marine infantry. Gondor's aging, heavy fleet didn't stand a chance against them.
Let's just look at the timeline for a second, because the speed of Cyan's explosive rise was staggering. It triggered a massive crisis for Gondor. I mean, from Lumber I's coronation in 310, it took just a few decades for Gondor to completely lose its grip. By 345, Gondorian merchants are so terrified they require armed escorts everywhere, and by 355, Gondor has entirely lost control of the League Sea. In a blink of an eye, historically speaking, Cyan systematically strips the superpower of its greatest asset, plunging Gondor into what its own historians would later call a dark age.
Now, imagine growing up as royalty in a superpower that is actively being humiliated on the world stage.
That profound humiliation burned deeply into young Prince Maximus of Gondor. According to the royal archives, a young Maximus actually asked his tutor why their merchants had to carry swords. The tutor simply replied that the sea no longer belonged to them. Maximus's response? Then we must take it back. That single formative childhood moment literally set the trajectory for the rest of his life.
Fast forward decades later, and a grown King Maximus struck back, setting the stage for the most devastating geopolitical clash in the region's history, the First Great Legion War, and its defining horrific centerpiece, the Siege of Dorwinion. Maximus marched 18,000 highly disciplined men and 30 warships straight to the doorstep of Cyan's prosperous frontier city. He was absolutely determined to bring the full, crushing weight of a superpower down on this upstart kingdom once and for all.
But Gondor didn't just blindly attack the city walls. No, they used their greatest strength, their engineering. Their brilliant tacticians constructed what became known as the Iron Ring around Dorwinion. Over 8 absolutely grueling months, they built new roads straight through the mud, erected massive bridges across the river, and dragged extremely heavy artillery into position. They slowly, methodically suffocated the city, bleeding it dry, just waiting for Cyan to crack and make a desperate mistake.
This siege really became the ultimate clash of leadership styles. On one hand, you have King Maximus of Gondor, a masterful, calculating strategist, watching the battlefield from a safe hilltop, orchestrating 28,000 men like it's a giant game of chess. And opposing him, Cyan's King Lumber III. This guy literally discarded his royal crown, picked up a standard blue infantry shield, and fought shoulder to shoulder with his ordinary soldiers right in the mud of the front lines. It is the perfect picture of the grand imperial machine going up against that gritty, unbreakable underdog spirit.
And everything culminated on a foggy morning known as the 14th of Thawing. Guys, it was absolute chaos. King Lumber III had actually intentionally let Gondor believe he was killed in a previous skirmish. Using the silence and confusion that followed, he snuck 15 heavy Crusader warships right through the thick sea fog. Out of nowhere, Cyan launched a devastating 240-cannon broadside that completely shattered Gondor's meticulous naval plans. The whole battle devolved into brutal, hand-to-hand boarding actions on burning ships, and eventually, incredibly, Gondor's disciplined infantry center broke. This moment perfectly highlights the core tension of the entire war. You have the horrific, fiery, completely uncontrollable reality of Dorwinion slamming headfirst into the stoic, rigid pride of the Gondorian imperial machine. King Maximus learned a very hard lesson that day. The finest, most perfectly engineered battle plans in the world only survive until they meet an enemy capable of total, unpredictable improvisation.
But, what happens after the victory is often just as important as the battle itself. As the Gondorian army finally broke and retreated, a lot of folks in Cyan wanted to pursue and massacre them, finish the job, right? Instead, King Lumber III showed incredible restraint. He looked at his men and said, "A wounded wolf is still a wolf." And then, incredibly, he ordered his troops to feed the Gondorian prisoners first. It's a profound reminder that while wars are won with swords and cannons, a lasting peace is sometimes built on unexpected mercy.
So, the really crucial takeaway here is this. Gondor lost the battle, yes, but that stinging defeat is actually what birthed its future empire. It's an absolutely brilliant lesson in adaptability. Gondor realized their old kingdom structure was just too rigid, so the young surviving officers took those harsh, bloody lessons of Dorwinion back home. They realized that to survive, they had to adapt, and they used those exact lessons to reshape Gondor from a vulnerable kingdom into a relentless, highly professional empire that would eventually dominate the entire continent. Which brings us to the end of this explainer, and it leaves us with a highly provocative question directly from the historical text. Could an empire continue expanding without losing itself? The lawless pirates of Palm Bay became a kingdom. The peaceful farmers of Gondor became a ruthless empire. Nothing in history stands still for very long. So, what do you think comes next?